Welcome back. Today we're diving deep into a moment of absolute crisis. You know, the kind of moment that completely stops you in your tracks and forces you to ask some of life's biggest questions. We're going to see how one of history's greatest warriors, right on the verge of the biggest battle of his life, finds himself totally and completely lost.
It's a question we've all faced, right? That feeling of being completely swamped, where you just can't see the way forward because of all the confusion and the doubt. We've all been there. But what happens when that feeling hits you at the most critical moment imaginable?
So let's set the scene. We're pulling this story straight from the Bhagavad Gita. Two huge armies are lined up, ready to go to war. But suddenly, the most legendary archer of them all, Arjuna, he just puts down his bow. Now, this isn't a crisis of courage. It's a crisis of conviction. He looks across the battlefield and sees his own family, his cousins, his teachers on the other side, and he just freezes. He is utterly perplexed.
And this, right here, is where everything changes. Arjuna has this profound realization that he cannot figure this out on his own. He turns to his friend and charioteer, Krishna, but the whole dynamic shifts. He's not just chatting anymore, he is literally begging for guidance.
This is the exact moment it happens, and it's captured perfectly in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 7. Let's listen to the original Sanskrit. Karpanya doshopahata swabhava, prichami tvam dharmasam muda cheta, yashreya hasyat nischitam bruhi, tanme shishyaste ham shadhimam tvam prapannam. So what does that all mean? Well, this is the absolute turning point. Arjuna just lays it all out there. He admits he's confused, that he's suffering from what the text calls measerly weakness. He completely drops the friendly back and forth and formally accepts Krishna as his spiritual master. He's saying, okay, I'm done trying to figure this out. I'm a student now. Teach me.
And what's so fascinating is how the source material explains this feeling of confusion. It basically says that perplexity is just part of the deal of life. Problems pop up whether you want them to or not. It uses this incredible analogy. It says they're like a forest fire that somehow blazes without being set by anyone. They just appear. And the text's advice isn't to just tough it out alone, but to actually seek out a qualified guide.
Now, Arjuna used that very specific phrase, miserly weakness. Let's break that down. The source defines a kripana, or a miser, as someone who has this precious human life but wastes it. They get so caught up in temporary worldly problems that they never try to solve the big questions of existence. They essentially live and die without ever figuring out the purpose of it all.
So you've got these two paths you can walk in life, according to this explanation. On one side, there's the kripana, the miser. This person is so attached to temporary things, always worrying about family and society, thinking they can somehow protect everyone from death. Then you have the brahmana, the intelligent person. They use their life to dig into the fundamental problems of existence. Arjuna realizes he's stuck in that miserly mindset, and he desperately wants out.
But this realization just sends Arjuna deeper down the rabbit hole. He starts thinking, okay, what if I do fight? What if I win? I get a whole kingdom. And then it hits him. None of it will matter. It won't fix the deep, gnawing grief that's eating him up inside.
And he says it himself in the very next verse, chapter 2, verse 8. Na hi prapashami, mama panudyad, yat shokam uchoshnam mindriyanam, avapya bhumao asapanafmam ridam, rajam suranam api chadipacham. I mean, wow, just think about that for a second. He says this grief is drying up his senses. He's not just sad, it feels like his very life force is being drained away. And his conclusion is crystal clear. No amount of worldly success, not even ruling the entire planet or becoming a god in heaven, is going to touch this pain.
The explanation in our source text really doubles down on this. It lists all the things we typically chase after to make ourselves feel better, right? Academic degrees, a fancy title, a ton of money, being the boss of everyone. But the argument is that when it comes to the real problems of life, all of that stuff is basically useless.
Because at the end of the day, the source points out that the fundamental challenges, birth, old age, disease, and death, are coming for everyone. No amount of money or power can stop that clock from ticking. And Arjuna gets this on a deep, intuitive level. He understands his grief is tied to these bigger truths, and winning a war is just a superficial fix.
Okay, so if winning the kingdom, having all the power and all the knowledge in the world can't solve his problem, what can? Well, this brings us right to the solution that the text offers. You have to find the right kind of guide. Now, according to the source, a true guide, What it calls a bona fide spiritual master isn't defined by their job or their social status. They could be a famous scholar, or they could come from the humblest background. What matters is their expertise, their mastery of the science of Krishna consciousness. And crucially, they have to be part of an unbroken chain of teachers passing that knowledge down.
And that's the big takeaway. That's the path Arjuna chooses. He realizes that to really truly get past his grief for good, he can't rely on what he already knows, and he certainly can't rely on material things. He has to take shelter of a teacher who can give him a much, much deeper perspective. This is where his real journey begins.
So that brings it all back to us, doesn't it? When we're faced with our own overwhelming moments, our own personal battlefields, where do we turn for real answers? Not the quick fixes, but for true, lasting clarity? What would a genuine guide even look like in our lives today? It's definitely something to think about.
Hey, if this exploration gave you some food for thought, do us a favor and hit that like button. Share it with someone who might find it valuable, and of course, subscribe for more deep dives. Thanks so much for joining me.